Yeah, I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the session today, wherein we are going to explore. The topic of the session is basically exploring travel rule compliance needs for exchanges and Web3 enterprises. First of all, thank you so much, Niels, for joining us for this session. It is a great honor to have been hosting you today. Along with Niels from Notabene, we have Rahil from Liminal, who's the AVP for Product and Reliability Engineering here at Liminal. And we also have Jayant, who is from the legal and compliance side, heading the compliance section at Liminal as the AVP. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out time from your schedule and joining us today. It's great to have all three of you here. And again, like the topic rightly mentions, we will be exploring different things around travel rule compliance, why travel rule is important for exchanges and Web3 enterprises. So again, thank you so much, folks, for joining in.
Pleasure to be here.
So to just start off the conversation, I think the first question News is for you. Is that Nota Bene has been in the travel rule compliance industry since as long as 2020 to solve FATF's crypto travel rule, right? Can you tell us more about Nota Bene, how things are happening? How is Nota Bene actually leading this entire piece?
Yeah, of course, and thank you a lot for having me. So first of all, very right. Like we have been working with the travel rules since 2020, and since sort of FATF came out with the first guidelines on the risk-based approach. So really, what we do at Notabene is that we provide a pre-transaction decision-making solution that then includes all the key features to help companies both implement, operationalize, but then also comply with the travel rule requirement in the local jurisdictions that our customers are operating in. And we have been committed to the travel rule since early days. So we have been working very closely with the industry in promoting the rollout and adoption of the travel rule and the regulatory requirements. We've been working very closely with regulators and industry players to ensure alignment between regulatory expectations and practical implementation of these regulatory requirements, right? So as an example, earlier this year, we participated in the FATF meeting up in Tokyo to provide insights on the current state of the global travel rule adoption, and also, of course, to get insights from a regulatory perspective of what is expected of the industry, both now but also in the future. So we play sort of, as we are a service provider in the industry, we try to bridge the gap between both the industry players, the regulators, and of course help our clients comply with the travel rule.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neil, for that answer. Right. So, from a general understanding per se, what we heard from you is that Nota Bene is more like in the center of the entire compliance ecosystem with travel rule coming into the picture. But for the larger audience, right, if you could please explain in a generic fashion as to what exactly travel rule is and why in today's day and age compliance is of much more importance for exchanges and web3 projects at large from a
Yeah.
global standpoint, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I'll try and keep it simple, right? Because once you actually really dig into travel rule, it becomes fairly complex. But really, the concept of travel rule is really all about transaction transparency, right? So before the travel rule, there was very little visibility into counterparty risk management, who you as an exchange were sending and receiving funds from. And that is because the nature of the blockchain transactions, right? Where blockchain transactions only can refer to themselves by design. So really what the industry is being asked by regulators now is to link these transactions to real world identities and entities, collecting more information from your customer in the transaction process, and then sharing that information with your trusted counterparties. And it's really to create this more transparency and build a more sort of robust AML and risk management framework, right? Knowing who you're actually sending and receiving funds from? Who are you facilitating funds for, right? First of all, of course, to avoid facilitating illicit funds to sanctioned parties or individuals, but also very much so for better counterparty risk management, knowing who you're dealing with as a business counterparty. And then also one thing we really focus on and Notabene is, of course, also bring more trust to the end customer, right? Ensuring putting that trust back to the end customer that the funds will actually end up where they intend them to end up. And we believe that the travel rule and other regulatory requirements in the future will lead to sort of wider adoption of the digital asset industry as a whole.
Got it. Understood. Thank you so much, Niels, for that answer, right? And trying to take a follow up from that particular answer you gave, I have a question both for you as well as Rahul from Liminal. Is that Liminal has partnered with Nota Bene to provide its users with the benefits of travel rule compliance, right? So I just wanted to understand from both your perspectives as to how this partnership/engagement would be working and how would the users be benefiting from this entire setup.
Cool. So, Needs, you want to go first or?
No, feel free to go first.
Okay, so I can go first. So yeah, I think so at Liminal, right? One of our highest priority is compliance, and we want to make all solutions for compliance available to our customers. And travel rule happens to be like a critical piece of compliance that is coming up now and also in the future. So that's why we were looking for some compliance solutions, and Nota Bene seem to be like the perfect fit. So at Liminal, we have something called as integrations, right, where our customers can come up and integrate third-party solutions, and that is where Nota Bene sits. And they can come and integrate, add their API keys into the platform, and all of their transactions will start becoming compliant. So this is again like important for our customers to give them an easy travel rule compliant solution. And also we went with Nota Bene first because again it was like a complete travel rule solution, and also it was like really good in terms of integration and stuff like that. But one point to note here is that we don't restrict our customers to one particular solution. They are free to come with their own solutions as well, but we obviously like recommend the best possible solutions in the market. Yeah, I think Niels, you can take it from here.
Yeah, and I think from all you touched it, right, like from our perspective, we believe in very much so in industry collaboration, right? And I think it's very important for as these new requirements come in, and as Rahul said, it is a sort of a different beast to sort of implement some of these requirements in already operating processes, right? So the easier we can make this for the industry joined together as Liminal and Notabene, I think that only benefits our shared customers, right? And it really have some benefits from an operational perspective that you can, within your custody provider and settlement layer, already ensure that you are compliant with the travel rule without having to jump between systems. So I think from that perspective, the integration really makes sense, both for us as two companies, but also for the industry and the industry players.
Got it. Thank you so much, Niels and Rahul, for the answer and how this is going to benefit both the players at large. Now, my question is directed to Jayant more from a compliance side of things, right? So, Jayant, what are some of the challenges that exchanges and Web3 enterprises face when it comes to complying with the travel rule, and how can these challenges be addressed from a global scale?
Right. Thanks, Ahmed. Uh, First and foremost, as we take this particular industry, Web3 and blockchain, so there is no unified regulation in place which sets the standards. What exactly needs to be complied and how exactly needs to be complied. I see from a regulatory standpoint the non-harmonization of regulations to be a major roadblock. a company which is operating in multiple jurisdictions is required to comply with the regulations of the respective jurisdictions. So now when you take as a group, they need to configure their systems, based on each of the country's requirements, and they need to be on top of all the regulations which are prevailing, as well as you just need to know the pulse of the regulator, what is going to happen in future. And this is something that a company needs to have a dedicated function where they have people who are regularly on the lookout of regulatory intelligence information which is coming in directly from the regulators. And moving to the granularity of the business, so whenever there is a cross-border transaction, so there are multiple jurisdictions which are coming into place. The requirements from a jurisdiction cannot be the same for the other jurisdiction. So there we need to have a balanced approach. So it may be challenging for the companies operating in this space in order to understand what it is. So it is always better to go for a solution or a solution provider like Notabene or Veriscope, whose solutions are actually designed based on the regulatory requirements of those particular jurisdictions that they want to operate in. And the next risk I would foresee, the challenge I would foresee, is basically on the security aspect. Since there is a lot of personally identifiable information which is going to traverse through the blockchain, it is very much important that this information is secured completely, so that there are no cyber and fraud risks. So if at all there is any leakage of information, it may lead to synthetic frauds or account takeovers, all schemes. So protocols like encryption protocols and securing storage of the keys and data may serve as a deterrent for all these risk incidents.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much, Jayan, for that answer. To give a follow-up question, and this is again Niels for you as well as Jayan, both more from a compliance side of things, is what are some of the best practices for implementing travel rule compliance in exchanges as well as Web3 enterprises? Because again, in both of your career tenures, you would have interacted, engaged with a lot of different exchanges, enterprises, a lot of different solutions wherein you would have seen these are some of the best practices, these are practices that could have been possibly avoided. So according to you and from both of your experiences, what are some of the best practices for implementing travel rule compliance across Web3 ecosystems?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
as you say, we see a lot of approaches to them. We also, of course, through the experience we have gained over the last few years, helping companies go live. I think one of the challenges that we have encountered that lead into one of the best practices is that one of the things is that there's no benchmark, right? So there's no sort of, cannot look to the neighbor and see how have they done, or you cannot see what have we done the last 5 or 10 or 20 years. But it's really sort of, you start on a blank sheet of paper here, right? To sort of implementing a new process that haven't been in the industry before. So that is challenging and leads to that the best practices are just being built as we speak, right? But really what we are starting to see some best practices involving, right? One thing I will highlight as a best practice though is that the first thing you have to do is focusing on your outgoing transactions, right? Because really with all your outgoing transactions is where you have full control of the travel rule process. So you can control what data you collect, you can control how you perform your risk assessment, you can control all that travel rule related and other things you have to do prior to the value transfer. You have full control of that before you release the funds onto the blockchain, right? And that's where we see all our, or most of our clients starting is focusing on the outgoing transactions. And then later on having a staged approach moving into then focusing on the deposits and then improving those processes as well. But the best practice we see now is starting from the outgoing transactions, as that's where you have the full control. So that is sort of the main thing to start from.
Yes. So my take is also in the lines of Niels. First and foremost is to understand the regulatory requirements which is governing a particular jurisdiction. So unless we know what exactly is required, we will not be able to implement any systems or processes. So it is always good to understand what is the regulatory requirements which is guiding this particular area. And next is obviously it's the Bible. Based on FATF's recommendation, we always follow a risk-based approach. You identify which is a high-risk area and which is the low-risk area, and you implement systems by integrating with solution providers like Notabene or Veriscope or any other API protocols. And you need to keep engaging with the regulator. There are certain countries where they have transaction reporting requirements. So unless and until we find that data which is actually being sourced is not going to suffice, so this particular integration may not be fruitful. So it is always good to have interaction with the regulators to understand what exactly is the stance, whether the data quality and all other aspects are addressed. And there is always room for improvement. So as and when we move forward, the regulatory space is going to be always evolving, and especially this Web3. And it is very much important to have continuous improvement and continuous feedback from the regulators in order to improvise on this area.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think what we also see, and in general with compliance, right, is that when you are in a jurisdiction where travel is required, regardless of how clear the regulations are from the regulators, it's always better to do something than do nothing, right? Because when you start doing something, your conversation with the regulators also become a lot easier, and they can provide feedback to you on what you are doing, and then you can alter from there, right? So I think that is a key thing to get started, and then regulators know that this is not going to happen from day one, but get started with a phased approach of integration, and then eventually you will get a long conversation with your regulators, your counterparties, the service providers. So I think that is a key point to keep in mind as well.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much, Niels, for that. So again, putting up a follow-up question, because you spoke about regulators and how they play a very important role in facilitating this across jurisdiction and geographies. According to you, what role can regulators play in facilitating travel rule compliance, especially for exchanges and Web3 enterprises?
I think one thing where that has been challenging for industry is what already been touched upon, right? Is that there's no global regulatory clarity, right? So if you are an exchange operating in multiple jurisdictions, it's very challenging because you have to implement travel rule with. I mean, the basic concept is the same, but there is sort of different requirements of threshold, what information you have to collect or receive. So that makes it challenging, right? So I think from a regulatory perspective, it will be a lot easier if regulators across the world, or at least in regions, got together and agreed on a coherent approach, also with dates that are aligning with each other, right, in terms of when companies have to go live. But at the same time, when you operate an exchange, you also have a responsibility to seek clarity from your regulators, right? And that leads back to what we just talked about, is like it's always easier to get started and then have a conversation with the regulators. But I think definitely communication between regulators and the industry players and service providers such as Liminal, you guys, and us, right? I think that will be key, and having a broader open discussion within the industry as a whole, I think that will help a lot.
Got it. Thank you, Niels, for that. So again, the next question, Jayant, is for you, and this is again from a regulatory compliance standpoint. Is that how can exchanges in particular and Web3 enterprises in general engage with regulators to ensure compliance?
That is a good question again. And first and foremost is that the Web3 enterprises as well as the exchanges need to ensure that they are doing legitimate business and they are helping the economy. So they need to have proactive engagement with the regulators, have open discussions and transparent discussions with them, what exactly they are trying to achieve and how exactly they are trying to achieve. And on top of that, they also need to understand what exactly are the regulations which are actually governing that particular jurisdiction. And they need to have technology providers or any other companies who can assist with implementing the rules and regulations. And a main aspect I would rather suggest is that cooperation from these enterprises, where the companies are open for any audits or even sharing information with the regulators, which is going to help the industry as a whole. And the companies or the players in this space can take part in working groups where they exchange ideas and participate in public consultations, as the regulators in all the jurisdictions require all the industry players in order to provide feedback. So this not only gives a reputation for the companies, but also help a particular country or the world at large in order to bolster the compliance regimes for Web3 space. And next one is on obviously take a risk-based approach and be transparent with the regulators and be cooperative with them.
Got it. Thank you so much, Jayan, for that. So the next question, Rahil, is for you. Is that how can blockchain technology be leveraged to facilitate travel rule compliance without compromising on decentralization and user privacy and identity?
Right. Thanks, Samarth. So I think in general, as you see right now, right, travel rule kind of operates in separation to blockchain, right? So travel rule is something that works in parallel to a blockchain transaction, and then somehow we link those two things like travel rule message and the transaction. I think one problem I see, and this came up during our integration or like talking to exchanges also, was that there are various travel rule providers like building their own solution, and there's no way to like communicate between them. I think this is probably in already in works. Maybe Niels might have a better idea here, but a blockchain has something called as decentralized identity, and there are some solutions kind of built similar to that. So maybe we can leverage that, where at least the identity of a VAST can reside on blockchain, and then that could become a place that is leveraged by other travel rule providers to like fetch travel rule information and stuff like that. So I think DID is one, like decentralized identity is one place I think where blockchain would definitely be able to help like generalizing the travel rule. Neil,
Got
maybe
it.
if you
Thank
want to add anything, yeah.
No, I think I mean, it is one of the challenges. The whole discussion around interoperability and discoverability and so on in the travel in the industry as a whole, right? And you're very right. There's a lot of things where we can utilize the blockchain to actually improve these processes. And I think one of the things we are really looking at Notabene, because part of our founding team actually came from building the decentralized identity protocol at Uport, the consensus company, before founding Notabene, right? So a lot of the focus from our founders is really how we can incorporate these decentralized identities into the travel processes, and how we can improve the user experience using or utilizing the decentralized identity technology as well behind, right? So that's something we will look at developing in the future. And again, the travel is still very new, right? So lots of challenges are still sort of surfacing, some of our old challenges, and I'm sure we will encounter new challenges as we move forward. But there's a lot of industry collaboration right now that are starting to form, which I think is very positive. And then we as a company also focusing, of course, continuously product development and ensuring that we can can cater to the market in the best possible way, and work with companies such as yourself to improve processes as we move forward.
Got it. Thank you so much, Niels, for that. So again, Rahul, the next question is for you. Is that what are the potential scalability challenges while implementing travel rule compliance measures in high volume cryptocurrency exchanges and Web3 platforms?
Right. So I think the answer to this is pretty much similar to what we discussed earlier, right? So as such, in terms of volume, I don't see any scalability problems because all of the platforms, like for example, Nota Bene is able to solve scalability issues there. The problem or the challenges are mainly about interoperability and compatibility between various systems. How do they talk with each other, and how fast we can bring that. The good thing is that now the regulations are quite clear in most of the jurisdictions, and we know what the end goal is. It's just reaching there. So I think now the pace will pick up in terms of solving those problems as well. Another space I think that is still kind of unsolved is the DeFi space, like how travel rule applies to DeFi staking. I'm not, maybe like it's not applicable on staking, but at least like DeFi or wherever assets are transferred in a decentralized way, how will we apply a travel rule over there? So that is something I think the regulators and us as an industry kind of needs to look at.
Got it. Got it. So, gentlemen, moving towards the conclusionary ends of our conversation, right? I have a question where I would want all three aspects of yours in terms of how do you think about it. Is that are there any industry standards or frameworks available for exchanges and Web3 enterprises to refer to while implementing travel rule compliance? And again, more so from a summary perspective, is how do you individually feel is the integration of travel rule with Web3 going to progress forward for the ecosystem in the days to come? So I think, Niels, we can start with you, followed by Jayant, and followed by Rahil.
I think the best framework that's available is Nota Bene, right? If you ask me. But again, I think it's back to that the travel is still so new, so we're just starting to see. I think the companies that have been live with the travel rule the longest have maybe just been live for about 2 years now with some of the transactions, right? So we are doing a lot of work with companies in industry, and while doing that, speaking with companies, speaking with regulators, we are building up a lot of experience in best practice implementation and rollout of the travel rule. So that is sort of the work that we're doing now. And then we're trying to compile all that, of course, in further conversations with industry players and regulators going forward. So I think, honestly, what I have seen, for instance, in India lately is the exchanges communicating a lot with each other around how they're going to do it. I think that is a really good approach to go for. If you can align with the other players within your jurisdiction, that will be very helpful for yourself in terms of operations. And then, of course, seek guidance and help from service providers such as Nota Bene and Liminal, as there is solutions out there, of course, that can help you comply with the travel rule, but then also know that it is a process and it is a journey to really sort of get to where you think you probably should be, but is slowly moving there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Niels, for that. Jayant, what would be your take to it?
Basically, one of the key aspects of the travel rule is actually performance of due diligence on the VASPs which are involved in the transfers. Be it originator or intermediary or beneficiary VASPs. So in order to ensure we have a holistic due diligence carried out, we need to understand the background of the VASP and the related documents available for each of the players in order to do a mutual due diligence on the virtual asset service providers. And I would say it's not a solution. There is a protocol which is called TRISA, Travel Rule Information Sharing Architecture. So this to some extent helps in order to conduct due diligence. But I foresee this platform to grow just like Swift KYC registry, as it happens in the fiat world, as we all best know. So what happens in Swift KYC registry is that the participants who are part of the Swift network will have access to the KYC documents of the other players. So this can be managed with the help of user management rules in order to provide access and then accept the documents for conducting due diligence. So I see a gap in this particular area where we may have lots of improvements and enhancements, where the VASPs will be able to do the due diligence without any assistance from rest of the players.
Got it. Understood. Thank you so much, Jan, for that. Lastly, Rael, your views and your take to the entire conversation that we've been having.
Sure. Yeah, I think Niels and Jen probably covered most of the things, but as of now, I think there's no well-defined, like obviously you have solutions like Nota Bene that you can use, but in terms of framework, I guess you can look towards how the fiat world, how the information sharing is done in the fiat world, or the FATF guidelines that have been provided. So that is like the best like framework out there when you are just starting with travel rule. And that is why, like, I think what Niels mentioned is important, right? It's like a journey, right? When you are starting with travel rule, it's very complicated. So you start. So I think Nota Bene has been through that journey, and Liminal has been through that journey, and then you can do your best effort in implementing travel rule based on whatever FATF guidelines are there, and to be the most compliant, right? So that's why I think like partnerships like this are really important, so that other people who are building on top of Web3, or even just like providing some digital asset product, they don't need to like worry too much about studying these things in detail, and they get like an out of box solution which is already implemented, right? So yeah, I think that is my conclusion to this.
Thank you so much, Rahul, for that. So, gentlemen, it was a pleasure talking to you and understanding your views and insights on the travel rule compliance and basically how it's going to pan out for exchanges and Web3 enterprises. So, first of all, again, thank you so much for taking out time and having this conversation. Especially Niels, thank you so much for coming out and speaking to us here at Liminal and breaking down this entire concept. And we hope that the collaboration that is there between Liminal and Nota Bene will become more and more fruitful and will help democratize this entire travel rule policy for the larger good and the larger audience, right? So again, thank you so much, folks, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
a lot.
guys. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.